Welcome to a very special edition of My Takes, That ESG Show. Today we have with us an eminent scholar, economist who does not need any introduction. But I would fail in my duty if I don't mention that he wears many accolades and hats very lightly. Please welcome Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog. Dr. Kumar, welcome to the show and thank you so much for your time.
Hi, Srinath. Lovely to be here and wonderful to connect with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My Take is a platform that amplifies voices and demystifies conversations about ESG and what it means to India. And this platform also addresses the digitally young that we seem to have in millions in India. So it is very appropriate, and I'm very happy that today I have the head of NITI Aayog who would demystify conversations around policy for the youngsters who watch our show. NITI Aayog's initiative across various design policy, program frameworks, and tracking mechanisms have had different reports and policy imperatives. With ESG becoming an essential policy conversation, Dr. Kumar, it would be lovely to have your thoughts on a simple word, goodness. How can we bring goodness to our everyday living, but using policy as a space, as the medium?
It's a very important issue that you raised, but also one which is a very deep one, because it must start off by first defining goodness as to what we mean with us, by what we mean by that. And I dare say that there is been a period, at least in our own recent history, where goodness has meant doing good for yourself and good doing to yourself, and only limiting it to that.
That's right.
And I think you and I must agree, and everybody else must agree, that that's not how you want to define goodness. Goodness must mean thinking about matters and persons and issues other than yourself, which may not affect you directly, but which surely affect you indirectly. And I think to that extent, goodness should mean some degree of, let me put it very mildly, some degree of lack of selfishness. And because I don't want to use big words like selflessness, that's not the point, but at least some degree of, where you don't think about what's good for you, as it were. The incentive structure in society has to be restructured to reward goodness and to punish, as it were, the lack of it, so I think that's where it should be, and we in NITI Aayog are doing a lot in this regard. Whether it's in water conservation or switching to electric mobility, or talking about a clean power, and encouraging now the shift to hydrogen, or shift to and green hydrogen, etc. So I think NITI Aayog is in a big way engaged with all of this, so that we create policies that will help our shift towards a greater ecological consciousness and greater social cohesion across the board.
So is it fair to say that probably in a nutshell, ESG space and the policy framework could act as karta for the future in terms of creating stewardship of good behavior?
Well, I wish we could, and I wish we could promote, and we could identify and promote leaders in this regard. And I think, but policy, how would policy help in that? We've not yet thought about it, but surely it can be done. And that I again said, it's, for example, not directly, but NITI Aayog brings out the rankings of all the states, across different parameters, whether it is in terms of, achieving the SDGs, or in terms of its quality of school education, or delivery of health services, or ease of doing business, or, now we are talking about water conservation. That's one of the things that we are doing. We bring out these indices, and the idea there is that, we identify those who are doing better than the others, and put it out in the public domain, so that others can then hopefully follow them and benchmark themselves against it. So that's the thing it's a thing in that direction. Now we call it competitive federalism, but we can, with the help of civil society, talk about competitive individualism, competitive goodness or individualism, and I think that will help. Now, and there is again we've done some of this, which is that for example, we are working with something called ICAN, which is India Coalition against COVID. That was the, and they've got lots of CSOs in a coalition there, and we are putting forward their example to the others as to how they can help, how the civil society organizations can help, better the lives of migrants and better the lives of those who've been left behind. And I think that's what Niti has a very strong vertical on civil society organizations, and we engage with them in the hope that we may be able to create exemplars, within the society, which will, go into ESG, space and create examples in that respect.
Now, this is fascinating, but if let's say somebody were listening to this and wants to reach out for their helping out their communities or their farming communities, I'm sure it is possible that there are learnings available with Niti Aayog and they can take it forward. I'm also aware Niti Aayog has done a lot of work on the environmental space. For example, be it the drinking water shortage study, or even the ambitious MOGA pilot project of 1 billion saplings under the aspirational district program. And yet, if we look at the state of our cities, I mean, India is not only about cities, India is also about non-cities, urban and micro pockets of rural India. But if you look at our cities, and it is important to look at cities because of urbanization, people coming there to work, adequate care had not been given probably for town planning. And today we are talking about, I mean, the COVID has been a rude wake-up call for all of us, from infrastructural issues to environmental concerns. How do we drive home further this point that we have only one nature, one earth, and there is no second nature at all? And how do we drive home that point?
Yeah, no, it's an extremely important point, and I think though that our younger generation is now much more attuned to it than we were, and we were growing up, and I think that's a huge it's a huge sort of silver lining, as it were, that we have, and I see this every day because we have a large cohort of what we call young professionals in NITI Aayog, and their commitment and passion to this is really worth noticing, as it were, and well. But we talked about the thing that we are just completing that. I was chairing a committee in NITI Aayog with all the relevant departments on improving the capacity for town planning in India. I mean,
wow.
We'll be surprised to know that there are only 4,000 or so positions for town planning in India, and 46% of them are not filled because you don't find town planning because colleges of architecture and engineering colleges don't have a discipline called town planning.
Oh my God!
So and we need to increase that very significantly, and we have taken some decisions that how we need to improve the supply of town planners in India, and hopefully this committee's recommendations will lead to that. Moreover, beyond that, see, we have now, we talked about smart cities, etc. This committee for the first time is talking about and emphasizing healthy cities, because
nice.
I think that's the way our future town planning should be done, which is that, just an example, when I grew up in Delhi, Delhi was a cyclist city. Delhi was predominantly, people, using cycles all over. Now there are our roads, etc. Unfortunately, don't even permit cycling, which is safe cycling. Now we need to go back to that because we know that burning more and more fuel is not healthy. It's not good either for nature or for ourselves. So what will be the concept of a healthy city, which will use, which will be a green city to begin with, but will also encourage healthy practices and healthy, sort of habits, etc. I think is something that we need to work on. So Niti Aayog is doing that. The Ministry of Urban Affairs, Urban and Housing Affairs is with us. What we want to do is to create a town planning capacity for all our, I think, 6,000 urban local bodies, and which is what, and which don't, by which we mean not just licensing and regulatory bodies, no,
Okay.
but genuinely town planners, who would work towards creating a more beautiful and healthier city. And I think this work is now started and will receive its due attention going forward. Now that's one. The other part of it, of course, is that the consciousness that we have only one planet and we have only this, to look after, I think is imbued in our own tradition. When you talk about, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam,
Correct.
that's what we meant. And, and India's tradition has never been to conquer nature. India's tradition has been to live with nature.
So that gives me an idea about ESG ratings and rankings that we seem to have in plethora across the world. There are, let's say, if you look at one particular brand, they would have 138 attributes and somebody else has 500 attributes that they measure. But looking back at the traditional India, when I say traditional India, it's not only our generation, but looking back few generations ago, India has always been, let's say, kosher and positive in ESG. I mean, our value system, our culture, our traditions always spoken positively about environment, about society being good, and including governance. And so the question is, does it actually merit at some point in time, instead of adopting the Western ESG frameworks, can we have a framework that is made for India? We have 1/6 of the world's population. We are seen as a investment destination. We are seen as a consumer market. But having said that, we're also in the cusp of growth. And does it make sense to bring in our traditional learnings into a ESG framework?
No, absolutely. Absolutely right. And I think we have to do it because, the Western, Occidental, developed economy framework we don't connect with that. And I don't think we will because, we are just, our values, our circumstances, our traditions, our history are all very different. So we have to create an Indian model of ESG. But Srinath, maybe because it is concerns environment and social. Now, governance, one may be able to generalize, as it were, the SOPs for good governance, whether within the corporate or within the government. But social and environment in India, one size will not fit all.
That's true.
Given our diversity, given our heterogeneity, given the fact that we are more diverse and larger than Europe from Moscow to London, and we are 29 states, each one of them could be a nation in itself, as it were. We will need to develop ESG models for our different states, And I can say that with great confidence because with this NITI Aayog, I've been able to, one of the big fortunate things have been that I've been able to travel across the country. And you see this very clearly, that what might be good social practice, up here in the north may not be seen as a good social practice out there in the sort of eastern or northeastern states. So I think that's one part of it, But on the other thing, some things of this can be generalized, and I think we should try and generalize them, in the Indian tradition.
So leading on from there to the corporate India, and the last 1 year, despite COVID, there have been a lot of learnings, and we still have the fundamental goal of reaching the $5 trillion GDP objective. And you've been very vocal, and Niti Aayog has done a lot of work in the disinvestment, privatization, the private sector growth capital, a lot of things on the digital India framework. And it's also very heartening to see that in the policy framework, there are a lot of youngsters who are actually doing good and policy good by volunteering and working with Niti Aayog. So if you had to look internally and say, what are the positiveness that you see in today's society that you think would help in this growth of corporate India?
I think in this last 1 year, and because of COVID and so on, I think there is now beginning, and because of the government's effort at privatization and at disinvestment and leaving the space for private sector. The Honorable Prime Minister standing in the Parliament and saying that we need to respect those who create value and so on. All of this to me means that today there is a much greater prospect potential for building trust between the government and the private sector. I think that's the sort of strongest silver lining that I have seen, which is that the two sides know very well that they have to work together. They are the two wheels of the chariot which will take the Indian economy forward. And I think that's extremely important. And if this is further strengthened, that will become the driver for our economic growth and for corporate, profit expansion and corporate growth as well. So that's the first part. The second part, I think, is that we have taken a number of steps to improve the investment environment in the country. Same thing, I would say, that the banking sector, several, whether it's the IBC or the GST, number of steps have been taken to make the environment more predictable and easier to do business with in this 1 year. I think the two together, the working together, the spirit of working together, and the government, in some sense, facilitating the growth of the corporate sector would help in taking the economy forward and in taking the corporate sector forward.
Dr. Kumar, thank you so much. That was wonderful conversation and insights, words of wisdom about what ESG means to India in terms of what are the opportunities and how we could rise up to the occasion for societal good. Thank you once again. And to continue listening to my takes, experts coming to the show talking about what ESG means to India, tune in on various handles of social media of my take, and see you next week.